Susan Atkins wasn't known for her brains, beauty, or trustworthiness in her lifetime. After the Tate LaBianca trials, Susan was convicted and sentenced to death. In 1972, the death penalty was ruled unconstitutional, and Susan, along with the other Manson family members, had their death penalty or death sentences commuted to life with the possibility of parole. And although Susan Atkins would repeatedly try to gain freedom through parole, she would ultimately fail, and she ended up dying in prison in 2009 from brain cancer. In the meantime, though, Susan Atkins created various pieces of artwork while incarcerated. In fact, she actually mentioned some of her creative efforts, during the last half of her book, Child of Satan, Child of God. There was the note about how I couldn't find the exact quote, but there was a note in there in the book that stated people would be surprised at how the Manson girls would essentially end up creating beautiful things while in prison. Later, though, with the invention of the internet, Susan's husband, James Whitehouse, ended up creating a website for her. Throughout the site, there were various pieces of art that she had created while in prison. The website was archived on the Wayback Machine, but it seems to be back up as of November 26, 2024, when I originally wrote this. It seems like it was down. I'm pretty sure that website was down for years. And I think James Whitehouse must have recently resurrected it. Either way, when I first started reading about the Manson family in 2019, I had tried to look for her website and it was down or there was nothing on it. And like I said, so in 2024 it seems to be back. I'm not sure what caused or why the site's been resurrected. Maybe because Leslie Van Houten ended up getting out on parole, or maybe it's just mere coincidence. Either way, though, there was a separate webpage on the site that was dedicated to some of Susan's artworks, and though it doesn't show everything that she had ever created while in prison. It states that she attended a watercolor class and ended up enjoying it. I'm assuming that she might have not ever had any previous art classes that inspired her. I know she obviously did some sort of art because, like I said, in her first book, she had mentioned doing arts and crafts in prison in the 70s. The art class that she took for watercolor was back in 1999. So I'm not sure if for almost 30 years that she did much of anything creatively. I don't know. Anyway, the page stated that Susan took advantage of the art classes that were offered at the prison, having read art books and magazines, and she practiced as often as possible. Susan created with watercolors, acrylic paint, pastels, graphite, pen and ink, and colored pencils. It states that in the past several years she has also studied jewelry making and enjoyed it very much. I assume that this was probably the last several years or so of her life. To quote, Susan always realized her interest and her talents were gifts from God, as was the simple fact that the California Department of Corrections allowed her the opportunity to enjoy them. This is something Susan did not take for granted. As such, she always dedicated her work to be serving those in the community and was able to raise thousands of dollars for the victims of her crimes. I cannot verify the veracity of that last statement. I am seriously unsure. I don't know what funds, if anything, went to the victims of the families, the Hinman, Tate, or LaBianca families. I'm not necessarily denying this, it's just that I've never seen any mentions of Susan's works going towards their pockets whatsoever. Honestly, as strange as it might seem, I think that some of her art was actually kind of beautiful. As easy as it is, and understandably so, to be disgusted by Susan's actions and behaviors, I can't deny that there was at least some fantastic pieces of artwork. I looked at her pieces before in the past, years before, and ended up using at least one as the background for some of the chapters of her first book. I actually really like the graphite that is 16 by 22, which is untitled. The detail to those flower petals is actually superb. Now, honestly, her paintings were like something you would see in Hobby Lobby or Target as a print. If there was a blind auction where you didn't know the creator, I absolutely do think that Susan's artwork would have sold out and probably sold high. It's strange. It's a very strange feeling to see beautiful pieces of art by a person convicted of such terrible crimes. Though, strangely, art is not exclusive to the good. Actually, having creative outlets in prisons can lead to lower rates of violence and potentially lower recidivism. Because, quite simply, it gives inmates something to do. With someone like Susan, she learned a trade with the jewelry making. This is something that surely her other inmates would have learned alongside with her and could have put to use on the outside. Of course, for those that were allowed out. I don't know what happened to any of her artwork after her death. I assume that it must just be all with her widow, James Whitehouse. I would actually be interested in seeing more of her artwork if he ever posted more of it on the website. So while it's strange in some ways to see such art from a notoriously disliked person, plenty of other inmates do create while in prison too. You see this with people like John Wayne Gacy, Bobby Beausoleil even, and Jodi Arias, and even more. So maybe this will be a little bit of a series of art created by convicted murderers and stuff like that. But I wanted to make this video because initially, like I said, before November of 2024, the website for Susan Atkins was down, or at least blank, for a while. It seems that for a very long time after Susan's death, the website was down. So I wanted to make a video about this section anyway, because it was kind of like lost media, so to speak. Let me know what you think, and if you want to see more about convict art, let me know. It is kind of a fascinating subject.